Hoff is an accomplished executive coach, educator, leader, and sought-after lecturer, and I can attest to that because I tracked him down for today. He holds 2 master's degrees in education and educational leadership, respectively, and is presently completing his he's done though. He finished his doctoral studies in human and organizational psychology, which analyzes successful individual or organizational change and development. Naftali's practical, action-oriented approach to coaching and training has endeared him to his many clients. His personal experience in the leadership field allows him to understand leaders' needs and craft solutions to help them optimize their performance and success. So if you would welcome with me, Mr. Naftali Hoff.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Is that too loud? Okay. I apologize for being sort of cooped up here in a corner. I have many years of experience as a classroom teacher, and those of you, anyone, by the way, ever been on the educational side, the academic side? Okay, so you know what it's like to stand here the entire time. It feels kind of limiting, right? But that's where my mic is, and I know I have a portable one, but I have to leave that for you guys in the event that you have questions later on. So we're going to have an opportunity to talk for a bit, and I'm thinking at about 9:15, 9:20, somewhere in there, we're going to have the opportunity to ask questions, at least in a formal sense. However, it's early in the morning. I know you're probably still on your first cup of coffee. I know I am. And so in order to make this as interactive as possible, I certainly wanted to encourage you, if you had questions, if you had thoughts, if you had things that you wanted to contribute to help all of us learn from your experience or your questions, please don't hesitate to do so. Okay, so it's going to be more lecture style, but I don't want it to feel like a lecture. Okay, the best as I can. All right, so I'm really glad to be here. I got to tell you, this is fantastic for me. I actually lived in Chicago for 12 years, and even though I'm a Yankees fan, I will say, go Cubs. Okay, although I did, on my flight in yesterday, the seat over I was watching, they were struggling, so if anyone here is from Cleveland, good luck to you guys as well. It's a fun time. It's a fun time, and I know that a lot of people here from the Midwest, and a series like Cleveland and Chicago doesn't happen every year, or maybe even every century. So let's enjoy it while we can. But really, staying on point, it's an honor to be here. And I want to thank the folks from AASP, from Melody, and really everybody for inviting me back. I was actually here last year, and I did a session on mentorship. And that one was actually much more of a workshop. And so we talked about, we rolled up our sleeves, we got into it. Maybe we'll be able to do a little bit of that today. But I think that our topic today, which is interesting, a bit heady, if you will, for first thing in the morning, yet I think very practical for so many of us, is something that I think we'll be able to get into, and hopefully you'll gain some practical applications for yourselves. And so I want to share with you the reason I feel even slightly appropriate to speak to you on this topic, which relates to how we each make a difference through our growth, our talent, and our resources, is the fact that I spent quite a few years in the principal seat. I never was on the advancement side, but I worked with our advancement personnel on a regular basis in a variety of different ways. And so I realized the importance of what it is that you do. And we'll talk about that more. But, you know, not always is that concept appreciated. Now, in Jewish tradition, there's a saying from the rabbis that says, Im ein kemach, ein Torah, which means, if there's no flour, there's no study. The concept is, if you can't sustain what you want to do, you can't actually make it happen. So it's important for you to recognize and understand, whether you're told this or not, and hopefully you are, in case you're not, and we'll talk about this more. But those who are out there actually actualizing the mission, those who are out there providing the education, those that are out there curating the museums and working directly with a variety of individuals, they could never do what they do if not for what you do. And so that's really important. It's a message we'll repeat again and again, because sometimes we don't hear it enough. And if I say it 5 times, you'll forgive me, but at the end of the day, I think it's something that's worthwhile for all of us to discuss. Now, today this is the first official learning session, is that correct? Okay, so you got a great program ahead of you. AASP does a fantastic job. They're one of the best in providing that. I think that's why you're all here. Okay, and hopefully you're going to learn a lot. I know that I learned a lot just by being a presenter / half participant in last year's program, and I look forward to learning again with you today. So, you know, it was interesting, when I first walked in, I anticipated, as we saw the survey that we have folks at different places professionally, I anticipated more people being on the front end of their careers. Those in years 1, 2, 3, et cetera, just from the term newcomers. I guess that's how it was interpreted to me. So I hope that all of you, regardless of your experience, will find our conversation meaningful, because regardless of where you are, I think we all have certain things in common. We all have certain values, certain goals, certain aspirations, and those are things that we can all learn from each other and gain from. And so, first of all, I want to wish you, those of you who are new, a lot of success in your career. I saw a few hands go up in the 0 to 1 category. Those of you who are a little bit further along, I want to wish you much continued success in your career, because you are in a great profession. We're going to talk about this later, but the idea that you are choosing something that has real meaning and purpose. You could be out there using your talents in a variety of ways, right? You could be in corporate America making a difference in that type of way, and that's fine. There's certainly nothing against anyone who earns their livelihood in that capacity. But you've chosen to work in a place where you live a mission every day. You work in a place where people, as a result of your efforts, like we talked about, are being educated, that people are being inspired, people are being helped. And so that really makes a difference. And, you know, probably when you first began, please, by the way, raise your hand in a minute if you feel that this describes you. When you first got started, you were bristling with enthusiasm. You were super excited, not just because it was a new job, but because of what your specific job had to offer. And then, as they say, life happens. Things started to go, the daily grind began to occur, and you started to feel a little bit maybe stuck in the grist of that mill, working in the day-to-day. Does anyone feel like that kind of describes them? They went from an initial high to somewhat of a little bit of a tapering of that high, not as enthusiastic as it used to be? Nobody? Just by show of hands, if you don't mind. It'll be a lot easier than trying to count heads. Okay, just one person like me, I suppose, in the back. All right, just the two of us. So that gentleman and I are going to have a conversation. The rest of you are welcome to listen. All right? But I think most of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, and again, we're still on our first cup of coffee, so anything could happen. But I think we all recognize that that initial enthusiasm sometimes has a tendency to wane. And that is not a reflection on you, and it's really not a reflection on what you do, it's just a reflection on life, right? Things that are new are exciting. We're always looking for, you know, I saw an interesting quote the other day, where it was like a little picture posted maybe to LinkedIn or one of these other social media sites, and it's a picture of the word tomorrow with like a dictionary description underneath it, and you see like the, you know, the way the dictionaries write the words out, etc. And it says where 99% of our dreams and fantasies and thoughts reside, you know, in this place called tomorrow, right? We're always thinking about tomorrow. Tomorrow will be, the sun will come out tomorrow. It's all about thinking about the future. But we also have to realize that we have to live in the present. And so that newness doesn't last forever, and the rigors of the job become apparent enough, and some of that wind starts to leave our sails. And perhaps more importantly, the sense of purpose and connection to the mission that caused us to sign up in the first place and to work specifically for nonprofit service begins to be replaced with some gnawing questions about our role and our impact. We wonder, frankly, if we're making a difference, and if the work that we do really matters all that much. Perhaps you labor in the back office and you don't feel part of a team, or at least in a position of influence. And even if you're front and center of all the office activity, some basic questions might flood your mind, such as, am I really making a meaningful contribution? Does anyone even notice me? Who really cares if I do everything right, or if I give my all? So if that describes you in any way, shape, or form, you should know you're not the only one. In fact, an alarmingly high rate of people struggle to find purpose and meaning in themselves and in what they do. This is a basic fact of humanity. We all want to feel valuable. We all want to make a difference, no matter what role we play. Mary Kay Ash once said, if everyone has an invisible sign hanging from their neck saying, make me feel important. Never forget this message when working with people. So if you work with a team, just envision them all right now for a second. They all have this little sign. Instead of having a name tag, it says, make me feel important. Now, of course, that describes us as well. And we'll talk about how we can feel more important for ourselves, because not always will somebody else do it for us. And that's important too, to understand. It may not be the best place to work. I'm not here to talk about that right now. But we recognize that some people are more naturally into providing feedback and support, and some people less so. And we have to make sure that we find ourselves to be in the right environment. So let me tell you a little story. It's, I don't know if it's true, but I think it's very powerful nonetheless. There was once a prisoner. He had been incarcerated for some type of petty crime, and he had been locked up for a number of years. And so he's in a jail cell. And in the cell, there was this massive wheel along the wall. And this massive wheel looked to be attached to something to the outside. And so every day, had nothing really to do. This was a few hundred years ago. Certainly no television to watch, nothing really to entertain himself with. And so he starts to turn the wheel. And every day, he's turning the wheel and turning the wheel and turning the wheel. And he's imagining, and he's just imagining, that on the other side of the wheel is a mill. On the other side of the wheel is some machinery. On the other side of the wheel is something that if I just turn the wheel every single day, day after day, I'm going to be making a difference through my efforts. So he comes out after however many years in prison, and he walks around to the other side. And what does he see? He sees a solid wall, and he collapses right away. Because he realized that all of those efforts were really didn't bring out, so to speak, anything meaningful for him, and he felt like he had wasted all that time and all that energy. Although he probably got a good workout, okay? But you get the idea. We all want to make a difference, and we all want to know exactly where our difference is going, so to speak. How do I see the end result of my effort for the betterment of the organization that I'm part of? And that's what we're going to talk about further today. Okay? Let me tell you another little story that I think is useful, because sometimes we think that it's only the little people like us who are somewhere in an office that we need this recognition. The reality is everybody needs the recognition. No matter how famous you are, no matter what you think you've done for the world, so to speak, everybody has this gnawing doubt in their mind saying, am I really important? Am I really doing something meaningful? And I think this story brings this out in a very powerful way. There's an organization called High Calling, which shared the following story. I need this, she said, looking each one of us in the eyes. I need to hear your stories. It reminds me of why I am doing this, why I started in the first place. We were sitting in a circle on a rooftop in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, a ragtag team of missionaries that included a doctor, nurses, nurse practitioners, students, and non-medical personnel, like me. We had just spent 4 days seeing almost 600 patients in a little clinic down the road, and we were sharing about how the experience had changed us. And we were tired. But perhaps none was more tired than Kathy Walmer, a nurse practitioner and executive director of Family Health Ministries, the organization that assembled our little team. Kathy and her husband, Dr. David Walmer, began the ministry 20 years earlier, after he had a life-changing experience during a mission trip to Haiti. Together they have built their ministry into two health clinics, an orphanage, a school, and plans for a women's health and birthing center, and have become accepted members in the Haitian communities that they serve. The Walmer family dedicated much of their life to improving the lives of the Haitian people. The impact that they made on countless people and countless lives is glaringly evident. Yet, Kathy sat before our group that night in aching transparency. And while I marveled that she would need a reminder of just how much the work that she does matters, isn't this what we all desire? To know that we're making a difference in the world? Think about that for just a second. This is a woman whose team is serving hundreds and hundreds of people on a regular basis. People who could not get the type of services that if not for them. And yet she wonders, am I really making a difference? So it's all of us. It's all of us. We all crave to know that we matter and to make a difference no matter what messaging you've received until now, or any of those self-doubts that linger within you. So I am here, if my words mean anything to you, to tell you that it's not true. We all make a difference. And we're going to talk about how that is. Now here's just an interesting thought. I know we have this concept in Jewish tradition, but I've seen it elsewhere as well, and I think it's just obvious to all of us. There are billions of people on this planet. And yet you are the only person who's exactly like you. With your looks, with your intellect, with your abilities, with your passions, with your circumstances. You're the only person in the world like you. And that alone, just pause and think about that for a second. There's nobody in the world like you. And there's nobody in the world who has the ability to do what you can do. And so if you think about your organization for a moment and your role within it, that's very powerful. And that means that they're very lucky to have you. They're very lucky to have you. Edmund Mibaka once said that despite where you stand in life at the moment, always remember that your presence on earth matters as much as everyone else's. We have an interesting hierarchy in our society. We tend to put certain people up on pedestals. Sometimes they deserve it, oftentimes in my personal opinion they don't. Okay? I think a lot of people who don't get the recognition that they deserve are really the ones who need to be up on those pedestals. Those are really the ones who deserve that recognition. Sort of an inverted society at times that we live in. But nonetheless, if we know our value, then that's going to make a difference for us. Okay, so that's pretty heavy, right? So we've talked about why we're important. We've talked about, general ideas of seeing our value. Let's try to apply it to the workplace, because I think that really matters. And so I would like to begin with 8 steps to talk about this morning. Different simple strategies that I think could help you make a difference in terms of envisioning the importance of the work that you do every day. And I'd like to begin with a story. But number one, just the strategy itself is envision the importance of your work, sort of creating that mental picture, that mental clarity. Have you heard of John Maxwell? You might be familiar with John Maxwell. He's a leadership guru. He's considered to be one of the experts in the field in the area of leadership. He's written many New York Times bestsellers. Certainly worth looking up if you're not familiar with him and you have any aspirations into the field of leadership. In fact, just as a brief aside, I did leave cards on your tables, and in there's a leadership book that you can download, and Maxwell's quoted a couple of times in there, and you're certainly welcome to take that. Some other gifts for you as well. So Maxwell tells the following story. A man's walking down the road, and he sees a construction site, probably an old-time construction site, maybe a few hundred years ago, and he sees 3 workers, bricklayers all, working on the road. And he approaches the first man, we'll call him Mr. A, and he says, Mr. A, what are you doing? He said, I am laying bricks. He proceeds another 20 yards, and he sees Mr. B. He says, sir, what are you doing? He says, I am building a wall. Finally, 20 yards further, he approaches Mr. C, and he says, sir, what are you doing this morning? And Mr. C says, I am building a cathedral. Same work for all of them. But the difference in the attitude and the difference in the vision is night and day. So you can interpret this story any which way you want. Maybe the first guy was just in it for a paycheck. Maybe he just saw brick after brick, day after day. For those of you old enough in the room, you do not need to date yourself. I'll do that for you. But for anyone who was young-ish or young at heart, when Dunkin' Donuts ran those commercials about 30 years ago, the little chunky guy with the round face and the mustache, and he'd wake up about 4 in the morning like I did today. Time to make the donuts. Some of you, I see, I got it. Okay, that Mr. A was that guy. Okay, now of course Dunkin' Donuts had a different agenda, but the point is, he probably looked very mechanical in this process. I'm laying bricks. The second guy already had a little bit more of a vision. He had a little bit more of a sense of direction. I'm building a wall, right? These bricks are not just being put one on top of another. They're working towards a goal. But he was limited. He was limited in his vision. So he only saw the wall. Mr. C, on the other hand, saw much more. Now, he would not build the cathedral by himself. In fact, there probably have hundreds, maybe even thousands of people, depending on the size of the structure, that would be required in order to put this thing together. But he saw his contribution and how ultimately it was building those bricks towards a fascinating and fantastic goal called building a cathedral. So you every day, wherever you sit in your office, whatever you do each day, everybody I'm sure is a little bit different. You have this massive campus perhaps that you're working off of, or some other wonderful organization where you sit. Do you see your space as just a wall at the most? Or do you see your contribution to the cathedral that you're building? If you can envision, how is my work every day working towards that cathedral building? Now the building might already be built many times over. You might not be engaged in a capital campaign and all that kind of stuff, but you're still building for the future all the time. You're getting the donors, you're getting the funding, you're getting whatever is needed. And so you are building the next cathedral, or you are reinforcing the cathedral, any way you want to look at it. But that's part of your vision. And if you can envision that clearly, and you can see how you're making that contribution, I think that you really can find yourself very motivated by doing so. Because some of us, we're interested in a paycheck, but again, you didn't sign up for nonprofit service for that. You could have gotten your paycheck anywhere. Hopefully you got it, you went into this business because you're mission driven. And so that mission really needs to be part and parcel of how we're thinking. Okay? Number 2, find your sense of purpose at work. Now this is important. Okay? It might be easier than we think, but it's important that we discuss it for a moment. For decades, Americans have ranked purpose as their top workplace priority, above promotions, income, job security, and hours. Parenthetically, it's very interesting, because often as leaders, anyone who runs a team, for example, in the room, oftentimes we think that we're going to motivate others most by raising their salary. And there's nothing wrong with raising people's salary, but the idea is that's actually not the primary motivator for most people. Most people want to find purpose in their work, as well as recognition. That has much more value to most people, and that's going to keep them longer in your field. For those of you who deal with retention, and for those of you who have to deal with training new people in after you hire them and all of that, that's a pain. And it could be pretty expensive as well. So if you really want to keep people on, make sure that they're connected, finding purpose in their work, as well as feeling that recognition. Let's go a little bit further. Work is a search for daily meaning, as well as daily bread, writes author Studs Terkel after interviewing hundreds of people in a striking array of jobs. Yet too often we feel that our work doesn't matter. So what makes a job meaningless? For starters, we know that people struggle to find meaning when they lack, number 1, autonomy, number 2, variety, number 3, challenge, number 4, performance feedback, very important, and number 5, the chance to work on a whole project or service from start to finish. Another important point, which by the way, not really our point, but nonetheless, ever since Ford Motor Company began the concept of the assembly line, we have sort of lost the concept of having the entire job in front of us. Meaning to say, the assembly line might be more efficient, but if I only see the little contribution that I make, and I make the same contribution time after time, it's time to make the donuts. It sort of loses that sense of, what is my real contribution? And how am I putting it all together? So when you can involve people, you might give them a specific slice of the pie, but find ways to bring them in, or bring yourself in, to the entire picture, so you can see how it all comes together. All of those contribute to meaning. But there's another factor that matters more. That's meaningful work. Consider the following jobs. They all meet some of the criteria above, yet about 90% of people fail to find them highly meaningful. Are you ready? Fashion designer, TV newscast director, revenue analyst. By the way, if I'm describing any of you, please don't feel bad. Web operations coordinator, airline reservations agent, graphics animator. These are just 6 examples. Why is meaning missing in their jobs? Because these positions rarely have a significant lasting impact on other people. If these jobs didn't exist, people wouldn't be all that much worse off. By contrast, here are some of the jobs that are highly meaningful to virtually everyone who holds them. Fire chief, nurse midwife, addiction counselor, child life specialist, neurosurgeon, adult literacy teacher. Now I can connect with the last one, though I did work with adults as well as with children. But these folks all make a difference in their work every single day. And they feel it. They feel it when they go to work every day. They know that they're making a difference because they see the impact on the people that they interact with. Now remember, just a quick story before we move on. I remember that I had taught a 9th grade class. It was actually a biblical studies class. I had one student who was with me for 1 year, and then he transferred to a different school. 3 years later, I saw him again as he was attending the graduation of his former classmates. So he's now just finishing 12th grade. We had last seen each other 3 years before at the end of 9th grade. And he says, I want you to know that this past year, I had a teacher, language arts teacher, who had assigned all of us to write about somebody who made a meaningful impact in our life. And I want you to know that I wrote about you. Of course, I was startled. I taught the kid for 40 minutes a day. for 1 year, freshman year, 3 years before. I didn't know what I did that was so significant. And he said the following, and will remain with me probably for the rest of my life. He said, because whenever you were teaching, you were always having fun. Now, it doesn't mean I did cartwheels in class. I didn't juggle, wasn't playing music, but there was a certain passion. There was a certain enthusiasm. There was a certain presence, I guess, that he felt that really, I guess you would say, inspired him. All of us, we don't realize necessarily the impact of passion. We don't necessarily realize the impact of our nonverbals in many ways. But if we bring that energy to the table, that also, it makes us more enthused, makes us like what we do much more, but it also impacts all of those around us. So these are jobs, all of the ones that I listed, and I believe, frankly, the ones that you're involved with, as well as we'll talk about in a second, all of them are jobs where we can feel a difference and feel a sense of purpose. Okay, so the single strongest predictor, let's move on here for a second. Okay, so we should have it easy, right? After all, we work for nonprofits that exist because of our mission. Our organizations exist to help educate and stimulate others, or to provide a service for people who will impact their quality of life. We build every day that cathedral that everybody can appreciate and value. So if we don't feel that sense of connection, where is it? Why are we not making that connection over here? So I think, and this is really important, by the way, something that we might not necessarily think of on our own, and actually something that was a revelation to me just very recently, but it makes all the sense in the world. I think it has to do with how connected we are to the organization's services and the end users. I'll say that one again. I think it has to do with how connected we are to the services that we provide and the end users who benefit from those services. Think of, for example, an automotive safety engineer who never met the drivers of the cars that they are helping to produce. Or think about medical scientists who never see a patient. Now think of an advancement staff member that rarely interacts with the students within their schools or universities, or the folks who frequent their museums, or the beneficiaries of their charitable work. No interaction, no connection. Imagine that scenario for a moment, just out of curiosity. Does anyone feel that that describes you to a large degree? Or most of you feel that you're out there? Let's start with the first one, for example. How many of you rarely interact with the end users of your organization? Looks to be a third to a half. That's a pretty sizable number. And how many of you would say you have regular interaction with the end users? Okay, good for you. Excellent. I'm sure that that makes a difference. By connecting directly with our end users, we can better appreciate our impact. Listen to some studies for a minute. According to one, radiologists who saw a patient's photo included in an x-ray wrote 29% longer reports and made 46% more accurate diagnoses because they saw that picture. University fundraisers who met a single student whose scholarship was funded by their work increased weekly phone minutes by 142% and produced over 400% more in weekly revenue. And that's an incredible difference. Okay, so just knowing where the benefits are, linking your efforts to a face or to a group of faces, just studying the names even, something where you can connect more directly to the people that are benefiting because of you. And we all know that universities and other organizations are providing scholarships all the time. How are they able to provide it if not for your efforts? So when you see that and you make that connection, it really can be very motivating and inspiring. That's why leaders at John Deere invite employees who build tractors to meet with farmers that actually use the tractors. Execs at Facebook invite software developers to hear from users who have found long-lost friends and family members thanks to their website. Leaders at Wells Fargo film videos of customers describing how low-interest loans have rescued them from debt. That's probably all I'm going to say about Wells Fargo this week. But you get the idea. And that's vision. That's just thinking. Connect all the people that are working so hard with those that are receiving that benefit. It's so logical, so simple, but yet so many of us don't do it, or maybe don't do it enough. And that's why it's really important. So what can you do? Maybe you don't have that opportunity given to you. Attend organizational events is a great way. Being there, being present anytime that you have the opportunity to interact. Pick up the phone if you can. Call some people, call the donors, call the end users, have conversation with them. How are they benefiting from your work and your service? Okay? Collect testimonials. And by the way, hang them up on the wall. I used to have a little hanging folder of all the testimonials. I hope you don't throw any of them away. Those testimonials are the breakfast of champions. And it's really important. Anytime you're feeling a little bit of a lull, you feel like you just don't have that moxie today, coffee's not helping you get through the grind, open it up and take a look. And that makes such a huge difference. Okay? I'm not sure we're going to get to all of it because I do want to leave you with an opportunity for questions. But let's try to take a look at a few more while we can. Another way is to engage in something called job crafting. Now, job crafting is an interesting concept. I wish we had more time to actually delve into it, but I'll mention what it is and we'll see if it's relevant to you. Just because you have a particular job title doesn't mean that you have no control about how your job is done. The concept of job crafting is that you take initiative to alter your role wherever possible by adding, emphasizing, revising, delegating, or minimizing tasks and interactions in pursuit of greater meaning. So I'm going to mention something now that is not presently available to you, but I'm going to pass it along so that it can be. This is something called an action brainstorming sheet. It's really very simple. I would encourage you to take a look at it later. It's designed for a little bit of a different purpose, but I think it could be useful for us as well. These read as follows: stop, minimize, keep doing, do more, and start. In effect, you think about your job performance. What do you do on a daily basis? Or what don't you do that you should be doing? So if you need to start something, you put it over here. If you need to do less of it because it's taking too much of your time, but it's really not in line with what you need to be doing, you put that under minimize. Keep doing means you're right on target with it. It's perfect for what you need to be doing. It gives you your energy. It's really consistent with your job description. Keep doing that. Sometimes you need to do more of it, and sometimes you need to just get started. Oh, so this one said stop, I'm sorry. So this one, stop, don't do it anymore. This one, get started with it. But I think something as simple as this, when you break down your job description and you look at different things that you're doing, could give you an opportunity to say, you know, I really find more meaning and fulfillment here. So maybe I can find an opportunity to do more of this and a little bit less of this. Maybe this I could delegate to somebody else. Maybe there's somebody within the office that would be more fitting or appropriate to handle this particular aspect of the position. So for example, hospital cleaners who lack patient contact might step up to provide emotional support to patients and their families. Technology associates begin volunteering for mentoring, teaching, and training roles. And so you might say, you know, I'm going to try to find more time for public service, or maybe more time to interact with our end users, or more time perhaps to focus on this particular part of my job that really brings me meaning and value. But of course, discussing with whoever you have to respond to in order to ensure that you're not going to find yourself in trouble as a result. But this has been used in corporate America, at Google and other places, where executives have mapped out ways to make their tasks and interactions more meaningful and to contribute to others. So in a case with Google where they engage in job crafting for 90 minutes, 6 weeks later, their managers and coworkers rated them as happier and more effective. They developed new skills to support more meaningful changes. The happiness and performance gains lasted for at least 6 months. So it really makes a difference. And sometimes all you have to do is do a little bit of analysis. What am I doing? What brings me meaning and purpose? How do I do more of that? And the things that are maybe a little bit less aligned with that, how do I find other ways to get that done in a way that takes less of my time so that I can devote it in the direction where I really want to put it. Another idea. This is going to feel, I think, a little bit awkward for almost everybody in the room because we typically don't like to do this. Engage in self-recognition. That's number 4. It sounds self-centered, doesn't seem right, but I think it really makes a difference. And what I would say to you is, if you can for a second, to think about, what have I done to help my team grow? What benefit might my work have on others around me and on myself? And how would things change for my team if I suddenly stopped doing my job? Let's think about that for 30 seconds. What am I doing to contribute to the well-being and to the growth of others? And when we list our contributions, we become more motivated to keep going because we start to see that our energies are really making that difference. How are you helping others do their work? How are you contributing to the overall work environment? How has the organization grown as a result of your efforts? Would anyone like to share? I don't want to put you on the spot this early in the morning. But I'm getting on a plane in a few hours' time, so you won't have to worry about me. Anyone? Yes, ma'am?
Part of what I've been doing this year is helping. In the past, I was the call center manager, and I've moved into a new position. So they've decided to hire a student manager. So I've been mentoring with that student.
Oh, beautiful.
And helping him understand the purpose of what we're doing. And training other students to come into the call center, and that's been very rewarding.
Wow, that's number 7, by the way. Good job. Okay, we'll see if we get there. Anyone else? Yes?
We have very low individual donors from our organization, and I work for a very poor charter school.
Okay.
And so I've increased the individual donors, so we've been able to bring in new culturally relevant programs for these kids.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. And have you, I'm just curious if you've taken the next step and actually engaged with the kids?
Oh yeah, I see the kids every day.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Okay.
I used to be a teacher.
And so you see the difference that it's making? Fantastic. Anyone else? I thought I saw a hand over here. By the way, I moonlight as an auctioneer, so if you raise your hand a little bit too high, you might buy this painting over here for $4,000. Anyone else? No? Okay. But I'm sure there are many stories like that. Many stories like that in the room of people just because you, and by the way, maybe it was part of your job description, maybe you just took initiative. Maybe you did something that wasn't officially part of your job. Has anyone done that just by a show of hands? Has anyone maybe added a wrinkle to your job description that wasn't officially part of it? Keep it nice and high. Okay, look around the room, everybody. Take a look and see. It looks like about 50%. Hands higher, please, everyone. Come on, you can do it. That's about 50, more than 50%. Yeah. Okay, that means you're really making that difference. And by the way, I hope everybody has been verbally and otherwise recognized for those efforts. But if you're not, we have to have the self-fortitude. We have to have that inner strength to know that we are making that difference. And the more, like I asked our colleague over here, the more that you can connect with the end users who are the beneficiaries of your motivation, of your extra efforts, the better it's going to be. So I'm going to just mention the last few very quickly. I also had a couple of videos, but I think we're going to be too short to get all of them in. I'll mention them quickly with just a drop of commentary, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. We've got a few more to go, but I still want to leave you with a little opportunity for questions, and I know we want to end this part of the session about 9:30. Okay, the next one is to be a little bit more assertive. More assertive means to, sometimes we think that if we're a little bit too pushy, people are not going to like us. But the video that I was going to show, it's actually an interesting video on time.com. It's the CEO of Best Buy. And he talks about how early on in his career, he was the manager of a particular store of the company that preceded Best Buy. Sound of Music, I think, is what it used to be called. I'm not sure. Maybe up in Minnesota, if I remember correctly. And he said that the CEO of the company, they weren't doing very well. They were dealing with some changes. They needed to make some adjustments at the top. He came to him because he had managed 3 people, all 3 of them, who he was considering to promote to the position of CEO. He said, you manage all 3 of these guys, who should we promote? So he built up the gumption that he never would have on his own normally, and he said, well, I think you should hire me, because I manage all 3 of them. And if they're all doing really well, it must be a reflection of my work. And so he used that assertiveness to eventually become CEO of Best Buy. Okay, and they've been very successful. A little bit of a bump in the road not that long ago, but we all know Best Buy, and they're very successful. One just passed last night on my way to the hotel. Very, very successful corporation. And that was an individual just because he was assertive to suggest that he had something to offer. And that's what I mean by assertiveness. Put yourself out there. Share ideas. Don't just, at meetings and whatnot, in case you're that quiet person who doesn't like to contribute, find a voice. Make that contribution. And if the public setting is not where you feel most comfortable, find quiet places by which to share ideas and all of that. And I think that if you are more assertive, you can, in your own way, create those opportunities. Now, okay, I'm going to stop on this idea for now. Next one, and this I can speak to from personal experience. Invest further in yourself. You might have all the degrees you need to do your job. Maybe your job just requires a bachelor's. Maybe it requires a master's degree. You might have already gotten that. But doing what you're doing today, attending conferences, finding ways to engage in learning, we all know that the field is changing all the time. So you might have gotten your degree 5, 10, 15 years ago. I'll tell you, I just finished a doctorate, and if not for the fact that I'm continuing to learn in specific areas, I don't feel that I'd be able and properly equipped to talk about them, because the degree is not going to teach you everything. But a lot of your experiences are unique to your particular workplace and your circumstance and your area of the field and all this. We all know that. So realize that the greatest investment that you can make is to continue to invest in yourself. Now, if there's funding for you to do it, great. Take full advantage. If there isn't, you have to be a little bit more prudent, but it's still worthwhile. As much as you can invest in yourself, and you're going to see the difference. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel more motivated to come to work because you know more. You feel more expert, so to speak, in your particular area. Number 7 was alluded to before, the idea of getting a mentor. Finding a mentor, if you are new to the field in particular, is so invaluable. Now, you may not have that opportunity in your own workplace. Maybe that right person doesn't exist. You can find them on LinkedIn. You can find them through other social networks, maybe at conferences like this. People who have a few years more experience than you, who can teach you the tricks of the trade. You know, there's a joke where a reporter comes to an entrepreneur, and he says, "Sir, how did you make so much money? How did you get so successful in life?" He said, "Easy, 2 words, good decisions." "But sir, how do you make good decisions? How do you come to that?" And he says, 2 words, that's easy as well. 1 word, experience. "And where do you gain that experience?" 2 words, bad decisions. Okay? So bad decisions, experience, good decisions, right? Let's cut out some of the bad decisions and experience stuff and use a mentor to help fill that void. And that could be somebody, by the way, doesn't have to be 10, 20 years your senior. It could be somebody with just a little bit more experience in the field, but someone who's credible, who knows what they're talking about, who's there and available for you. Actually, that was my topic last year. The main thing that people talked about was that the mentor wasn't committed enough to provide that continuing mentorship. It's so important. That person has to be there for you. They have to be good listeners. They can't be judgmental. You've got to get all your ducks lined up in a row. But this is really valuable and important. And if you can find somebody who's your senior, then maybe a peer mentor at the least, where you could brainstorm and share ideas. What do you think about this? And maybe you set goals with each other, and you hold yourselves accountable to those goals. Right? It's wonderful for you to go ahead and do a SMART goals analysis or something similar, and you set goals and what you're going to try to achieve in fundraising and in other areas of your professional work. It's got to be measurable and quantifiable. It's got to be something that's action-oriented. We know all this stuff about SMART goals. But one of the main points that I think is really crucial is that you hold yourself accountable. And one way by which to do that, since it's hard for ourselves to be accountable all the time, is to get somebody else that we're going to meet over coffee once a week, or maybe twice a month. And we're going to sit down and we're going to compare notes. Right? You met your goals, you didn't meet your goals, why didn't you? Having this conversation and talking about it. And when you brainstorm with others in a safe environment where you can open up, and it's not going to reflect on your job, and it's not going to cause a demotion or anything like this, that's a great place by which to have those conversations and really learn and grow. And if you can mentor others, as we talked about, that gives such satisfaction, right? Everybody has a teacher within them somewhere. Everybody wants to be able to give and be able to share. And that's really important. So wherever you can find an opportunity to give to somebody else, you might say, I'm just 3 years in the field, 5 years in the field, how much do I know? Trust me, you know a lot. And you know a lot more for somebody who just got started. So anybody who's just graduating, first year, second year, that type of thing, they're desperate. They're looking for any opportunity, for any insight. And if you could provide that, not only does it make you feel good, but it also makes you feel, it helps you hone your own skills. Right? I had a teacher who used to say, if you can't say it, you don't know it. And research tells us that the best way to remember information and to remember it clearly is through teaching that information. It's one level if I hear it, another level if I write it down, another level if I do this, that, see a picture, etc., etc. The highest level of retention and clarity of retention comes from teaching. So if you don't have a formal teaching opportunity, create informal opportunities through mentorship. And as you express ideas, you're getting clear in your own mind. How did I achieve that success? What were the bumps along the way? How can I help somebody else avoid them? All that good stuff. That happens through a mentoring relationship. Now the last one that I'd like to share with you, and then I really do need to wrap it up. Sometimes when things are not going well, the natural inclination is to withdraw, to start doing other things, to spend more time checking our emails, to go to our social media pages, whatever we might do when we feel that we're not being productive. And of course, it's a vicious cycle. It sort of feeds into everything else from beforehand. But research tells us, and in my case, tradition tells us as well, that if you want to love something, if you want to invest in something, if you want to love something, you need to invest in it. Okay? We use the term in the wrong way. I love steak. I love the Yankees or the Cubs. I love whatever. Right? But that love is very superficial. If you love the steak, you wouldn't eat it. Or fish for that matter. Or anything else. Right? The love means you love yourself, and the steak is the means by which you express that love for yourself. It's really what it means. Right? But when you love somebody, real love, genuine love, is about investment in the relationship. That's what makes somebody that much want to connect with you that much deeper, etc. The more you give to something, the more you express it. In Hebrew, the word love is ahava, and the word hav means to give. So the giving draws out the love, and it's a fascinating concept. So if you're feeling a little bit down about your job, right, doesn't mean you can't make perfect improvements, it doesn't mean that there can't be corrections, but one thing you got to do is work harder. Invest more into it. We all know the more you invest in something, the more you like it, right? There are people in this room that will only drink Coke, am I correct? Amen. And there are people in this room that will die for a bottle of Pepsi, will not touch the red and white, probably. Now I lived, as a head of school, I was down in Atlanta for 3 years, so you know that that's Coke country, okay? But you understand that you invest in something. It could be a school for your kids. It could be a place of worship. It could be a gym. It could be anything. A supermarket, whatever you say, this is my place, this is my favorite flavor, this is my favorite whatever, and you sort of identify with a brand, research tells us that you are much more inclined to defend that decision even when there's evidence to support against it. Meaning to say we get invested in that process. And once we're there, we're going to like it a lot more. There's a TED Talk that if we had a couple more hours to talk together, I would have showed you possibly, where he talks about origami, and people were making it, and they didn't do a particularly good job. In some cases, they weren't even given instructions, and we all know what origami looks like for novices, even when they are given instructions. But yet the people who made it had a tendency to love it, because they invested themselves in that process. So to briefly recap, before I hand the podium over to Melody and or our next speakers, I'll briefly recount the key ideas of our conversation this morning. We started with a problem. To the degree that we feel that we're not making enough of a difference, how do we make more of a difference? How do we feel our impact? And so we talked about 8 different strategies, which I'll briefly review. Number 1, to envision the importance of what you do every day. That's the cathedral story of John Maxwell. I am building a cathedral. My university, my museum, my organization, whatever you're doing, that's a cathedral, and your work is imprinted every day somewhere in that structure. Number 2, to try to find your sense of purpose. The more that we can identify purpose, the more we're going to feel motivated and satisfied. And of course, purpose should be pretty easy for all of us, so long as we identify and connect with the people who are really benefiting from our services. So to the degree that you need to get out there more, to the degree that you need to be at events, connect with people, all of that, that's going to help you find more meaning and purpose. Number 3, we discussed engaging in job crafting. How do you go ahead and tweak aspects of your work to find the parts that are really meaningful to you and to do more of those while finding others to do maybe some of the things that you find less meaningful for you. Number 4, to engage in self-recognition, as we did a little bit of together. What are the differences that I'm making? And write it down and demonstrate it for others. And by the way, you can do this for other people as well. I'll leave you with this last story before I summarize the rest. One year when I was head of school, I came across this just very simple but great idea. And it said, "Dear so-and-so, I'm really looking forward to another year of working together. One thing about you that I particularly appreciate is X. Looking forward to, however else I concluded, sincerely," and I signed it. So the 80%, 90% of the language of every card was exactly the same. There was only one difference besides for the person's name on the top. And that was the unique thing, the quality, the attribute, the value that I felt that that person contributed to their particular class, to our school, etc. And I saw all these cards the following days and weeks hanging up on the teachers' bulletin boards right next to their workspace, because they saw the recognition and they wanted to be able to reconnect with it. Somebody took the time to handwrite a note that actually spoke to their unique contribution, and that we all, I think, appreciate very much. So we have to self-recognize, but we also want to provide that recognition for others. And by the way, it'll come around. When you start, it's a wonderful thing. Once you recognize others, they'll start to recognize you, and you'll get it back in that way. Number 5 is the idea of to be more assertive. You have great ideas. You see things in the workplace. Find ways to bring those ideas to practice in your organization. Number 6, invest further in yourself. Make sure that you're not resting on your laurels, but you're constantly finding opportunities, conferences, schooling, courses, whatever it might be. There's no greater investment that you can make than in yourself and in your learning. Number 7, get a mentor. And as an ancillary to that, to become a mentor. But getting a mentor gives you an opportunity to learn from others, gaining their experience, making good decisions right away, and you feel good about it because there's somebody there to guide you, and it really provides that support. And finally, number 8, to invest more. Right? Just when you think you've had enough and you want to withdraw, now's the time to put more into it. Because with those efforts, with that continued involvement, you're going to see that you're more connected than ever before. And if that doesn't work, then we have to have a conversation. But if it does work, that's usually a very effective way to ultimately allow you to feel that daily satisfaction in your work. So I'm going to wrap up my official comments over here. I'm a little bit over and I apologize. Do we want to give anyone a chance for a couple of questions? Okay, are there any questions that anyone has about what I said, would like to elaborate with a personal experience before I officially send you all off, I guess, to our next speaker? Yes?
The job crafting
Yes.
worksheet, how can we get a copy of that?
Okay, so I'm going to send a copy via email to the team, and it's going to be uploaded. Now, the app will be available
App is
for at least the whole
available now,
conference, if not longer. Okay? So, and by the way, if you don't get it, my email is on those business cards on your table.
Yeah.
So in addition to the leadership ebook that's on the business card, you can free download. I did also include these envelope openers. Rumor has it that advancement personnel gets mail sometimes. It's a rumor, I'm not sure. I mean, some of it's electronic, but you still get the old-fashioned stuff, right? So those envelope openers are available for you as well. And if I may for a second, I also include on a few tables, one over here and a couple towards the back, email sign-up sheets. So if you are interested in signing up, I send emails on leadership and education and whatnot on a pretty regular basis. You're welcome to sign up, and I will include you on the list. Thank you for that question. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Ma'am, I'm sorry. My apologies. I don't have my glasses on.
I'm sorry, on the assertiveness.
Assertiveness?
Yes.
Okay.
How
What is?
to be assertive but not overpowering?
That's a great question. That's going to take longer than the short answer that I will give you. Okay, but we will all converse in the hallway on this one, I think. I think a nice way initially is to just, did you consider, maybe it's a good idea, put it in a very non-threatening type of way. But I'm noticing this, what are your thoughts? Dale Carnegie talks about it, others talk about it as well. The idea of sort of planting a seed and letting it grow, let them own the idea. Right, there's somebody who was a friend and advisor, confidant of one of the early 20th century presidents. I'd like to think it was Calvin Coolidge, but I'm not certain. And this guy was an expert at sort of planting ideas and letting the president sort of mull it over. Next thing you know, he was presenting the idea as his own. Now the confidant, if you wanted the credit, could have gotten all miffed about it. But his real goal was to get him to change his thinking. So if your goal is promotion, so to speak, it may not work as effectively. But if the goal is to help the team and help the organization, that could be a very nice strategy. And as you build equity, as you build credibility within what you do, people are going to start to look for you for advice. Even if you're junior, that's one of the things we couldn't really get into, but leadership is not about a title. Leadership is about influence. And you can be influential at any level within the organization. The key thing is that your voice and your ideas are something that people respect. And as they hear it, you don't have to have all the answers, but if you raise great questions, people are going to really respond to that as well. Thank you for that. Was that responsive to your question?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so I think my time is done. I want to thank you all for getting up bright and early to be here for this part of the session. I know you have a lot of good stuff coming your way, and I want to thank you again, Melody and AASP, for giving me the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you this morning.
Thank you.